Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how I prepare my live sets in Ableton to play my songs live. And I kind of want to address a common misconception here that us electronic musicians, we just know how to press play and that was it basically as far as our performance. No, I want to show you that we can actually give a truly authentic live performance as well. And there's 4 key ingredients to that in my opinion. So number 1 is you want to be able to play different patches throughout your song, as opposed to just the same kind of sound from beginning to end. I think it's much cooler if you're able to quickly switch between sounds so that you can play different parts within that same song. And you can actually do so by using your computer keyboard and assigning different patches to different keys. So you don't even need an extra MIDI controller for that, which is super cool. Number 2 is you want to be able to mess around with the structure of your song without being bound to using the same structure you have on the track you uploaded to Spotify maybe. No, what you want to do is you want to divide your track into the parts that make it up, so intro, verse, chorus, etc. And again, assign each of those parts to its own key on your computer keyboard so that you can freely launch them and always be in control of what comes next. Number 3 is you want to use some drum pads if you have some. And you know, it could be for the actual rhythmic backbone of your track, so you're actually playing drums there. Or maybe you want to use some loops for that and only use the pads for some percussion fills. Whatever your plan, I'm going to show you how to incorporate those into your live show as well. So that's yet another extra layer you can put in there. Number 4 is you want to use sliders, knobs, whatever it is you have in your MIDI controller to apply some live effects. You know, filters, reverbs, delay, chorus, some modulation of some kind, whatever. So I think you can see my point here, which is to allow you guys to be able to potentially deliver a completely unique and different rendition of your material on every gig. So before we dive right into it though, one word of advice. This is not going to be your run-of-the-mill Ableton tutorial where I teach you the basics, like how to record MIDI, how to start playback, you know? There's tons of those tutorials out there, and if you don't have a grasp on the basics yet, I would suggest you go watch those and then come back. But if you have some working command of Ableton, and you don't need to be a power user, but at least know the basics, then we can get right into it, and let's do that in fact, and I'll see you after the video. So here we are in Ableton Live, and let's get straight to the first point I just made. I want to be able to play different patches throughout the song. And the way I solved that kind of issue is by having several tracks, as you can see here. And each track has kind of its own instrument. They are on MIDI tracks. And that instrument has a particular patch loaded up, which I want to be playing in this song. So, for instance, on track number 4, I have a nice lead sound going on. I can play that. On track number 3, I have an organ. And if I want to play that sound, I just have to record enable that track. So you can see this kind of little thing here turned red. On track number 2, I have some bass going on, so I can record enable that and play that live. Now, of course, it's not very convenient to use your mouse to record enable different tracks, which is why I have assigned this function to my number keys here, which I have also color coded. So, you know, track number 1 is red, and if I click on it, I select the first track. If I want to select track number 3, which is yellow, easy as that. The assignments you make by just clicking on the key button here, then you click on the control you want to assign on screen, and then you click or you push the key which you want that control assigned to. So easy peasy. Now, on my first track, I usually have drums. On my second one, I have bass. 3 to 5 have either leads or pads, depending on the song. Track number 6 is a noise track. And I explain more about that in a second in the 4th part of this video. Track number 7, you know, this one is not actually a MIDI track. It's more of a track with kind of field recordings, sound effects that I might have within the song. So like on this particular live set, I have this old clock. You know, but if your music doesn't feature this kind of Foley field recording kind of sounds, that's so much the better. You can just use up another track for pads, keys, what have you. And then track number 8 is going to remain a mystery for a bit as well. I'm going to deactivate it because I'm going to explain to you what that is for in the 3rd section of this video. So That is it for my tracks, really. You might have noticed that my F keys here are color-coded as well. And this is because Ableton, you know, you don't even need to assign those to anything. By default, Ableton is assigning these to the mute and unmute function of your tracks. So if I wanted to mute the first track, I just press F1, and as you can see, the first track is grayed out. That means it's muted. Then I can bring it back again by just clicking F1 again. And this is very useful because it adds yet another level of kind of creativity to your live performance. You can, you know, cut things out, bring them back in. It's up to you. Good. So that is it for my tracks. Now, my second point was I want to be able to kind of control the song structure. And that Ableton allows you to do with something called scenes. So you might notice there are some MIDI clips here on my first 3 tracks on my first row. And the first clip is a drum pattern. On track number 2 I have bass, of course. Then I have some organ going on track number 3. So how do I launch all of these at the same time? Well, with this kind of master launch button here. So that is basically my first scene. My first scene is kind of a chorus. So what you want to do is you want to divide your song into up to 8 different kind of parts it has. Intro, verse, chorus, what have you. And each part is going to become a scene. So it will have some pre-recorded MIDI parts, but it will also have some live playing. Like in this case, I have, as you can see, tracks number 4 and 5, which are completely empty, meaning that I could launch my first scene and play either track number 4 or track number 5 live. So that is very handy. In fact, let me launch the first scene. So, you know, you can basically set up things the way you like. You get to decide which parts are pre-recorded for each scene, which parts you want to play live, which instruments you want to play live, which parts you want to mute and unmute. So you have a ton of control right here. And of course, you might have noticed I have the numpad keys here color-coded as well. And in fact, those I have assigned to launching different scenes. So number 1 here is going to launch the first scene. Number 2 is going to launch the second scene, etc. And you can mix up the structure, you know? You don't have to launch 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. You can go freely about this. You could start with the intro, then move on to the chorus instead of the verse by launching, I don't know, scene number 3 instead of scene number 2, for instance. So you have full control over that as well, which is great. So that's it for my second point. My third point being, I want to be able to kind of have my drums and the rest of my sounds kind of separate. And I'm going to show you why. In fact, let me move this here. So you can see how my, well, you know it already probably, but this is what my MIDI controller looks like. I have some drum pads here and I have some keys here. And with my current track selection method, as you might have noticed, I can only select one track at a time. So if I want to play drums, I have to select drums, which means I won't be able to play any keys, which is kind of stupid because I have a separate key bed and, you know, drum pads. So potentially I could play them together at the same time. So why would I not want to do that? Which means we have to change our track selection method here a bit. Now, there's 3 steps to doing so. And the first one is to make sure that your keys and your drum pads are sending MIDI into Ableton from 2 different channels. And you might have noticed that all my tracks here, which I want to play on my keyboard, are set to receive MIDI on the first channel, whereas my drum track here is set to receive MIDI on the 10th channel. So you have to tell Ableton to be selective with MIDI, and you have to set things up on your MIDI controller as well. And this kind of varies depending on your MIDI controller, but it's usually a fairly intuitive and easy task. So you have to set your controller up so that your keys send MIDI through channel 1, so that, you know, my kind of key tracks in Ableton can pick up information on the first channel. And then you gotta set up your drum pads to send MIDI information on channel number 10. and then set your drum track on Ableton to receive MIDI information on channel number 10. So that's the first step. And this kind of is also a kind of extra security layer, because as you can see, I have record enabled, I should say, track number 3 right now, my organ. And even if I play my drum pads, track number 3 is not going to pick up those notes because they are coming from channel 10, and track number 3 is only listening to channel 1. And at the same time, if I select the first track, or if I record enable the first track and I play my drum pads, it will pick up those notes because they are being sent on channel 10, and this track is set to receive them on channel 10. So if I play my keys, that track is ignoring them because they are sending MIDI on the first channel. So that's kind of the first step. The second step is to do with the monitoring setting right here. When my tracks are set to auto, like they are, that means that they will play back any MIDI clips we might have pre-recorded there, plus any live notes we're playing, if that track is record enabled. Which is why if I select track number 5 and I play some notes, those same notes are not going to trigger tracks number 4, 3, and 2, because they are not record enabled. In fact, if I were to record enable all at the same time by holding my control key, this is what would happen. Since they all listen to notes on the first channel, and they are all record enabled, they all play back the notes I sent to them. Which is of course not what we want, right? We're happy with having one track record armed at any time. But that kind of prevents us from playing the drum parts, because if we want to play drums, we have to select the first track, which in turn will unrecord arm all my other tracks, so I won't be able to play any keys at the same time. So I might have to switch monitoring method, and I might want to set my drums to in. So the track kind of turns blue, and what that does is it allows the track to monitor, to play back notes I send to it live, even if it's not record enabled. So what I could do is I could record enable, say, track number 3 to play my organ. Therefore, track number 1 is not record enabled, but seeing as it's set to monitor in, it still monitors the MIDI notes I send to it from my drum pads. So I can play drums and keys at the same time. So problem solved, you might think, well, not so fast. It's not that easy. You might have noticed that all my pre-recorded MIDI parts on the first track have now been grayed out. And in fact, if I launch my first scene, where are my drums? And that is kind of the problem with having your monitoring mode set to in. It will monitor only live notes you send to it from your keyboard. It will ignore any pre-recorded clips you might have there. Which means that we need to set this back to auto. So there are our pre-recorded drums again, but now we cannot play them live. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we leave this track as is, and we create an extra track, which is track number 8. So let me activate that. It has no MIDI clips, and why would it need to? We have our pre-recorded parts already on the first track. It only receives MIDI on the 10th channel, so it's just for my drums. Monitoring is set to in, so we don't need to record enable it for it to pick up the notes we throw at it live. And here is the key. You can set the MIDI to menu here to send that MIDI that it captures to our first track where our drums are. So by doing that, our first track here will play back our pre-recorded drum parts. Track number 8 will capture our live drum parts, and neither one of them needs to be record enabled. So we can keep record enabling, alternatively, our parts that we want to play with our keys. So I'm going to launch the first scene to prove that we can still hear our pre-recorded drum parts. I'm going to play some live drums on my drum pads to prove that track number 8 is picking up those notes. And I'm going to select different key tracks to show you that you can play those at the same time as your drum pads as well. Excuse my mistake there, but I think I've proven my point here. So that is kind of the solution. You gotta sacrifice one extra track, but I think it's definitely worth it. So, moving on, we still have one mystery track here, which is track number 6, and our master effects. And that all goes together nicely because it all relies on our faders here. So, let's start with track number 6. Now, you might have noticed there are MIDI clips on every single row here. But if we play back any scene, we don't hear anything coming from track 6, actually. Notice how the meter doesn't show any activity. And, you know, that is weird because, as you can see, there is, well, it's a very simple MIDI clip. It's just one long-held note, but it's copied and pasted across all of my rows here. So why are we not hearing anything? Well, the reason for that is that we have some filtering going on here. So I'm using Hybrid for my noise and for many other things. I love that synth. But you don't have to use Hybrid, of course. Whatever you have will be just fine. The important thing is that you have two filters, a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter. And that is precisely what we have here. On my second slot, I have a high-pass filter. And on my first slot, I have a low-pass filter. And I have assigned those to my first two sliders here. And again, just like before, you don't have to click on the key button here, but on the MIDI button. And the process is the same though. You just move the control you want to assign to something, then you move the slider, or you press the drum pad, or whatever you want that control assigned to on your controller. And that was it, boom. Mapping is made. So I have mapped my high pass filter to my first slider, and my low pass filter to my second slider. And as you can see, the low pass filter here is turned all the way down. And that is precisely the reason why you don't hear anything, even if I launch a noise clip, because I'm filtering out all the frequencies. But listen to what happens if I kind of open up the filter and have a look here. Applied some high-pass filtering there as well, and I think it's very nice if you can have both filters kind of work together, like this. I think that was a pretty smooth transition, and I love this trick because you can have, you know, noise risers and tension building effects on every scene potentially, so long as you have a MIDI clip there. And when you don't want to use it, you just, you know, close up the low pass filter or the high pass filter to make sure that nothing comes through. But the moment you want to apply an effect, the moment you want a noise riser effect to happen, you can just open up the filters and have fun with it. And it takes a bit of, you know, playing around to find the kind of the sweet spots to kind of use both filters together with one another to get the most out of them. But I think it's definitely worth it. So that solves the mystery of track number 6. Now moving on, I have sliders 3 and 4, which are assigned to some master effects. So these are effects that will affect all of my tracks. And again, we have a low pass and a high pass filter, but again, this time they affect all of our tracks, and they sound something like this. So nothing extremely special there, but it always sounds cool, let's be honest. A low pass filter and a high pass filter always sound cool, and it's always something good to have on your master bus. Moving on, slider number 5, I have assigned, oh, this is interesting, I have assigned it to a sample reduction effect, which is followed by this utility plugin you see here, which I'm only using for gain reduction purposes. You know, if my bit reduction plugin here had its own dedicated gain knob, I wouldn't bother using an extra plugin for that, but it doesn't. So, you know, I have to make work with another plugin. And the interesting thing about this is that the more downsampling I apply, so the more I push that fader, the more the gain knob is actually being turned down. Have a look at it visually. Turning up the effect and the gain is going down. So again, assigning that is very easy. Where is it? Down here. You can see that I've assigned my fifth slider here to this gain reduction effect. It goes from a minimum of 1, which is actually the sample divider. So it divides my sample rate by 1, so basically it's not dividing it, up to 51. And at the same time, the gain goes from 0 to minus almost 15 dBs. And the reason for that is the sample rate reduction effect. It will dirty up your sound, for sure. It will make things less clear, but at the same time, it will make them way more aggressive. And all that aggression kind of results in an increase in gain, actually, or in perceived gain, at least. So, if I wouldn't balance that out, I would have this very weird kind of effect where the more I dirty up the sound, the cooler it sounds because there's been an increase in gain. And when I turn the effect back down and I go back to normal, it kind of sounds dull and flat, and I don't want that. I kind of want my standard sound to be the cool sound and to kind of dirty it up, but when it gets back to normal, it sounds cooler. And that is why I have some gain reduction going on, and you can listen for yourselves what that sounds like. You know, when it goes back to normal, it sounds cooler than with the effect on, which is what I want in the end. And the same thing I did here for this chorus effect. As you can see, if I push up the slider, it goes to 100% wet. There's way less gain reduction this time. I didn't need to go down 15 dBs. Didn't even need 3 apparently, but there is a high pass filter built into this chorus. So the more effect is applied, the less low frequency content there is. And have a listen to that one as well. Right, so these are my creative effects here. And then of course you might have noticed I have 2 buses here, a reverb bus and a delay bus. And I'm basically, with my last 2 sliders, I'm controlling the sends of every single track. So by just moving one slider, all tracks are being sent into my reverb bus. And by moving the second slider here, which is my last slider, all tracks are being sent to my delay bus. So let's have a listen to that as well. That was the reverb. Let's have a listen to the delay. Pretty groovy. So yeah, that's the last 2 sliders. And my last piece of advice in terms of sliders would be make it consistent across tracks. Make sure that, you know, spend some time, decide which effects you want to use live. You know, you don't have to copy me necessarily. Maybe you don't like bit reduction, so you might find something else. But choose a couple of effects and assign them to your sliders, and then live with that kind of assignment and copy it throughout your tracks, throughout your live sets. I would definitely not recommend to have different assignments for each live set, because when you play live, you kind of want to know that, you know, I feel like applying some low pass, I just grab slider number 4 instinctively. I don't have to think about, oh wait, what kind of effect did I assign this slider to in this song? And maybe you grab the wrong slider. So you want to make things easy so that you can be creative and instinctively, you know, do what it is you want to do without having to think too much about it and run the risk of, you know, grabbing the wrong slider and, you know. Again, the same as with tracks, you know, make sure that you have kind of a consistent layout, because you want to kind of be able to instinctively almost select what you want to play live, you know. If I know that on every project my bass will be on track 2, I know that by selecting 2 I will play some live bass, you know. I don't have to remember, oh wait, but in this project maybe it was, I don't know, the drums. So kind of pick the best layout, the one that you think would work on most cases for you, and just stick with it and apply it consistently throughout your songs. Right, so a ton of information there, I know. If there's anything that I didn't explain well enough, then please, by all means, do leave a comment. As you can see, at the time of recording this at least, the channel is very small, so I'm able to read all your comments and answer your questions as best I can. So I strongly recommend you ask right away if there's something bothering you, if you didn't understand something to its fullest. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoy this content, then consider subscribing and hit that notification bell if you want to be informed whenever I release a new video. It could be a tutorial like this one, or a live guitar performance, or maybe a live rendition of one of my own songs using the same principles and techniques I just showed you. So again, if you're up for that, hit subscribe, click that notification bell, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.